Perimenopause affects millions of women during some of the most pivotal years of their careers, yet it remains one of the least discussed topics in the workplace. In episode 6 of Leading Out Loud, workplace well-being expert Renee Machel shares powerful insights on how perimenopause impacts women's health, confidence, and performance. We explore the physical and cognitive symptoms that often go unrecognized, the hidden cost to organizations when these challenges are ignored, and why awareness matters for both employees and leaders. Renee also offers practical strategies for creating more supportive workplaces, from normalizing conversations to redesigning systems that prioritize well-being and retention.
For those that have not had the pleasure of meeting you yet, today we have Renee Machel with us. Renee, for listeners that may not be familiar with your work in the space, can you share a little bit about your background in workplace well-being?
Absolutely. So I got into mental health and well-being in 2017 with my partner, Quincy Hawley. That came from a place of helping others do the same thing that he and I were able to do for ourselves, which was get out of a place of poor well-being and move into a place of sustainable and what we now call like true well-being, versus like pseudo well-being. So I struggled with my mental health and my physical health in my early 20s, and I felt like I had to go under the crust of the earth to develop systems that really supported me. After I did that, what we sort of realized that I wasn't an anomaly. By late 2000s, we started to have this conversation of well-being in vet med, and I recognized that I could help other people. And so Dr. Hawley and I went into formal programs that we could get certified in so that we could structure, develop, or learning programs for other people. And so since 2017, we've been helping people do just that through coaching and online programs and speaking and workshops. And we help individuals as well as workplaces make those changes, whether it's small shifts or big shifts, to support their well-being.
Yeah. And I think that's what drew me to you and Quincy when we kind of met in the conference circuit back in the day, is because of your focus. And I think we have a lot of alignment in that we all recognize that that has kind of been an underserved area of our industry, is that mental well-being. And, you know, as employees, what can you do to advocate for your well-being in the space within which you work? And then also as employers or leaders or managers, you know, what do you need to do to ensure that you're cultivating that environment ultimately for success? Because it's a win-win. If you have people burning out and miserable, you're not able to focus on the work and get the job done. And so, of course, there is a desire and a need to kind of provide those resources to our team members. Now, I want to dive into today's topic, which you had presented, totally caught me off guard, but then I was like, duh, like it makes so much sense. So I think it's really interesting considering vet med workforce is predominantly women. What led you to begin speaking openly about perimenopause in professional environments?
Oh my goodness. It's the same thing that started me on Get Motivated's journey, which is my personal experience. So when we're recording this podcast, I am 41, I think. Shout out to those who always have to use a calculator to like, how old am I?
Right.
So 41, and I had my son at 35, and I'd say maybe 3 years after him, I started to notice some changes occurring, and some of it was internal turbulence, much like I felt at the start of my struggles in my 20s, this internal discontentment and suffering and sort of turmoil that would fluctuate. And then other things that were more physical manifestations. And there would be mild symptoms or significant symptoms that got me researching hormone like drops after pregnancy. So I'll be really open about this. I've had neuropathy for a number of years, and I was on medication before I got pregnant. When I got pregnant, my neurologist dropped the medication. We went on to full supplements, and the withdrawal period was terrible as far as symptoms go. But then the symptoms subsided during pregnancy in a tolerable sense. After pregnancy, I was asymptomatic completely for like 2.5 years. And I was breastfeeding for much of that time. So when that began back, I was like, well, this is interesting. Like, what is that? I was fascinated. So I dove into NIH studies and I'm like, what does progesterone do to the nerves? What does estrogen do to the nerve? Like, really researching these things. And then it was just these very seemingly unconnected, like seemingly just random, spontaneous things. Some of them would be like super weird. And then it was like I had so many things that, again, that no one could tell me about. I was going into my physician's offices time after time after time saying, this is the new thing for this, for today. And one of the biggest things for me was a loss of resilience. So, because I have an incredible, robust toolbox of well-being tools, for me to struggle with the things that I was struggling with, I was like, I need a tool that I didn't even know existed because the things that I had weren't effective for me. And so, again, started in the research, and then with that, I'm not the anomaly. The symptoms are connected. There's a bigger conversation to be had here. I think I'm still on the front of the workplace conversation. We're starting to see the conversation about menopause and perimenopause in mainstream news and media, and it'll eventually find its way to workplaces. So we are seeing a growing body of research around perimenopause and menopause and then the workplace. So it was just a natural transition of we need support. We need support. And I'm not yet an expert. I don't know that I'll ever be an expert, but certainly I can be a facilitator for these topics. And just like at Motivated, there are systems that we can develop that will support individuals and workplaces because it doesn't have to be overly complicated if we're willing to have that conversation. And what I have found in my work is people are so ready for it.
It's interesting how you've explained that because similar to mental health and general well-being, 10 years ago, nobody was talking about that. Now that's kind of, thankfully, that's a lot of what you hear about. It's more mainstream. So the taboo in that is starting to subside. And to your point, here we go with yet another topic, perimenopause impacting more than 80% of our workforce at some point. Now, you've written some literature about this transition. And what really struck me was how that transition can show up during peak career years. Now, why is that timing so significant for both individuals and organizations, in your opinion?
Yeah. So perimenopause is the time before menopause. We're more familiar with menopause being a period of time for people. It's been commonly expressed with older women stating, I'm in menopause, but really, when we look at the medicine, it's postmenopausal. Menopause is sort of marked by this singular event where it's done. And then it's postmenopausal. The perimenopause time frame can be 8 to 10 years before menopause starts or happens, rather. Which means we're looking at people in late 30s to that 40s and early or mid 50s range, depending on, of course, when we started, and every woman's different, but this general range of like in our 40s. When we look at the arc of a career, that's also the time when people have the most experience and they start getting into leadership positions. So when we look at the organizations and we have women who are in these leadership positions, sharing their experience, sharing their knowledge, training other people, and still absorbing it, right? There's a lot to learn in our 40s and in that position in our career. But when the symptoms begin to happen and compound, you'll find that productivity drops and the workforce changes because there is, and again, if we go back to the data, we have over $150 billion globally in just productivity losses. Then we have 1 in 5 and to 1 in 10. There's different studies, but somewhere in that number of women actually quitting. And that's pretty significant because there's not that many, we'll say, there's only one manager for each location sort of thing. You have someone who leaves, and if they don't fully train someone, you have another person going into a management spot only because of seniority, not because they're ready to be a leader. So those are two of the biggest things, is that it's just timing, but it leaves the individual feeling lost and potentially actually being lost if they don't know what's happening, if they don't know how to support themselves in that process. And here's the other big thing. It's not just the leaders, right? You just said it yourself. We have 80% and growing of a women demographic in vet med. And so when we look at the workforce of the employees, if we're not asking ourselves, why are these people struggling and how do I support them? You're going to see it in so many ways that impact patient care, interpersonal relationships with their colleagues, their relationship with leadership, their opportunities to get leadership positions. It's endless, and we're only beginning to understand what it looks like in the workforce, but those are some of the big ones that have already emerged.
It's just so interesting. I mean, I'm definitely viewing you as the subject matter expert just because of the rabbit holes you dove into, and the fact that, I mean, to my knowledge, the conversation just isn't happening. But in your opinion, what are some ways that professionals may unknowingly start to self-limit or pull back in their careers during this phase?
If they're unaware of what's happening, then you can't troubleshoot. But whether they're aware or unaware, what you'll see is just a higher level of burnout, also some limitations around can't do that thing. I can't take on that other responsibility because as of right now, I feel like I'm treading water. We have about 40% of women who say perimenopausal or menopausal symptoms have interfered with their life and their work. And when we look at this age outside of work, you have people who are taking care of elderly parents. You have people taking care of children, no matter how old they are. They're oftentimes in a relationship or they live with people. There's so much on these people's plates that to even think about doing this new thing, it could be really scary. Our risk aversion might change in that time of your life. The questions around, am I ready for that? So we kind of see that people get into survival mode. And when we're in survival mode, we're not in an open and receiving sort of place. It's difficult to find alignment. It's difficult to create alignment. You're really just like day to day trying to get through it. Even if you're not in a leadership position, I believe most people in vet med, you are a high performer. This industry is not for the faint of heart. This industry is not for the, we'll say, lazy people. Most people are on their toes from sunup till sundown. And so as high performers, we are wired to problem solve. And oftentimes, and we talk about this in mental health and well-being, is we've had a narrative in your mind for a long time, especially if you haven't done self-work, that I'm the problem. That's the immediate narrative, is that I'm the problem. And it's not the system. And so my new phrase going forward in any regard of my work is that burnout is more of a systems problem. It's not a personal problem. Is it something that we experience personally? Sure. But it is a systems problem.
Yeah.
And so I want people to give, yes, we need ownership. We need self-accountability. We need self-advocacy. I'm not taking away our personal responsibilities, but I am giving you permission and hopefully trying to alleviate that heavier weight of I'm the problem. You know, are we part of our experience in this life? For certain. Do we have agency in this life? 1000%. But trust in this is that it's not just you. It's not just something that you can fix magically, but that's where, you know, people want to start retreating. And if they don't know what the problems actually are, it's incredibly difficult. It's almost impossible to mitigate those problems. And so awareness becomes one of those big things that we start talking about for individuals and workforces.
Well, you bring up some great points. Some things that come to mind as you're kind of unpacking this for us. You mentioned burnout, and I can't help but wonder, you know, considering the fact of with perimenopause, it's not as obvious as menopause, right? And the age range of the group it can impact is pretty vast, meaning you can be in your 30s. It's not an obvious, I'm 50, so now this is going to happen. Given the fact that in vet med in particular, we already know the data is out there that because of this fast-paced, empathetic healthcare type of system, we are more prone to burnout, passion fatigue, ethical fatigue. I can't help but imagine that some individuals that might actually be experiencing perimenopause are confusing those symptoms for burnout or compassion fatigue. And because the genesis of the issue is not appropriately identified, they feel like they're going crazy because it's like, even to your point, you have all these resources. And if somebody like you has these resources and you're like, well, wow, this really isn't working. What about an average person with no resources?
Oh my gosh, you hit the nail on the head. And I have to bring this up. I created this journal. And it started by creating this first page, which is these are the symptoms that we are tracking for perimenopause.
Wait, there's like 1,000.
That's like, right? Like, oh, I'm blonde. Okay, here we are.
Right.
No,
Are you
it
thirsty?
seems like exactly right. Does your eye blink?
Right.
It's really not like that. I mean, and remember like some of those ads that we see on TV with like medicines and stuff, like you might experience like the most ridiculous things. It's not that. Some of them are quite specific but yes, it is a lot. And absolutely some of it is an overlap, but it's not as many as you would think. A lot of these are physical manifestations, and we can see physical manifestations with high states of burnout, poor well-being. That's what happened to me originally, was like I was experiencing GI issues and skin changes, things like that. So we see some of those things, but absolutely. And the other thing is to say that they don't have to be independent. I want to think about perimenopause and burnout and or compassion fatigue as a Venn diagram. There's going to be things that are in that category that overlap with perimenopause, and then compassion fatigue, and then overarching caregiver archetype that we see being a detriment to ourselves. And we've talked about this. I know you and I have talked about this, where the caregiver identity it's not just our job, it is who we are. And it can sometimes be a fault to ourselves, right? If we're not able to prioritize our own health and well-being in order to serve other people or pets. I think that is a place that we can begin researching and trying to connect the dots. And we may be able to do that in certain programs. Like I'm thinking about how do we, and that's the kind of the question for thought leaders like you and I to go, how do we start to connect that for people?
Yeah.
We use the ProQual survey in the CVBP program, which is the Certificate of Veterinary Burnout Preparedness. And so we see data trending upward for burnout and compassion fatigue. So one of the curiosities would be is how do I work in a data point or multiple data points for us to be able to track the overlap of those symptoms on a qualitative sense. But I think just having the conversations more and more with people to go, okay, if I gave you a breakdown, would you be able to identify sort of these differences? And between awareness and identifying them, that is incredibly liberating because you said it, people aren't crazy, but that is how women feel when we are like feeling like we're losing our minds. And I felt that. I was like, I mean, I feel like I'm going, great, whether it's the physical symptoms, I'm in and out of the physician's office and I'm not getting the answers that I need.
Yeah.
Or if it's like the mental conversations, like I'm so lucky to have my best friend be my life coach and business partner and to know everything about my life and to feel like I can have these coaching talks frequently and unpack these things. We talk about these things and not everyone has that, but I would encourage you to give it a go because you will be like, I'm not alone. I am not the only person with this incredibly obscure, like really weird symptom. And that itself is like, oh my gosh, there's no other answer but that.
Yeah.
Like it's not just you, but when we're not talking about it, you feel like you're crazy and you feel like you're alone and you feel like you can't figure it out.
Right. I feel the need for a PSA here.
Yeah.
From my own experience as well, is that, and you've mentioned this, you are very analytical. And I think your brain is research biased. So you'll go to the case studies, you'll do the work. I think a lot of people don't necessarily, but I would encourage anyone listening to be sure that they are an advocate for themselves. So regardless of the credentials of the doctor you're working with, nobody knows you as well as you know yourself. Keep that log of odd things, changes, things that hadn't normally happened to you. Go on the internet, use AI, plug it in and see what it says. And push is what I've learned is you have to advocate for you. You have to push because I can tell you what's going to happen. Okay. You're afraid you're crazy. These are all your inner ear itches, which is like allegedly a thing. Like all these weird shit is happening to you. Okay. Let's run your labs. Let's look at your hormone levels. Interesting. Everything is normal. Yeah. And I said that just to trigger you because this is what's happening. And so I would argue, do not say, okay, thank you. I'll see you next year. If you have symptoms and you feel like you're going crazy, you push and say, that's great. Now, what do we do to address the symptoms that I'm experiencing?
Thank you for that. That is so timely, brilliant, very well said. Absolutely, that will happen. And part of that is because, again, menopause is happening as this one thing. But when we look at like this is our chart, right? So this is what happens to our hormones throughout a course of 28 days.
Yeah.
And that's more than one hormone that's happening. So if I draw blood on Tuesday, September 13th, it's going to be different than October 15th, or whatever the thing is. So the lab work isn't always going to scream at us, but we see this also in cancer patients, right? Our old geriatric patients who we run the labs, it all comes back within normal ranges. And so cancer is that sneaky thing that doesn't always show up on imaging and laboratory diagnostics. But that's why there's also, the part to go. What has changed? What are the top symptoms to discuss? What are, if we got to the point where we're going to address some things, if you're working with, I changed OBGs. OBGYNs. I changed and I researched I went to go do my annual and I called and the receptionist said, yes, so and so is, equipped to have these conversations. And I said, I disagree. I tried to have this conversation with her last year and I felt like it went nowhere. I need to find someone else. I went onto the website and I see that so and so is, researching and treating women as a whole person.
Yeah.
I want to see her. And so I went in, dopest chick. Oh my God. I was like, you are a godsend.
Yeah.
And she didn't dismiss me. And it was life changing. It was like, okay, I can be Renee again. So absolutely keep advocating for yourself. Be willing to change, be willing to research, be willing to push back, be willing to have uncomfortable conversations, even with what feels like a stranger, right? A physician. It's still weird. Let her know that something itches. Let her know the thing that you think is not related. And yeah, do some research if you're interested in it. Like I said, the resources are growing. There's books being written about it. It's popping up on the internet. We have to have respect for all of their training and everything. And to go, is to make sure that we don't have like a thyroid issue, or something like that. And so for people, we're running lab work and we are getting baselines, like it still is of value to have lab work within normal limits. We want to rule these things out, which that should be fairly familiar for people in vet med.
Right.
To just apply some of those same principles, but some people might forget that. So keep that lens on as well, doing it in like an effective way and be open to what they have to say. And let it be an open dialogue. And if you're not on patient portals with your providers, get on patient portals. If the only time you have access to your providers is once a year, bro, text them people. That is what it's like. And again, find someone who will respond to your messages. Find someone who has a patient portal that you can, message your providers. And it doesn't matter what the provider is, whether it's your neurologist or your OBGYN. I've had those conversations with my neurologist, like, listen, I want to take a holistic approach here. I want to try these things. I want to find out if it's related or if it's not. And the thing we have to remember is that in human medicine, everyone is specialized. And that can be helpful, but it also can be a problem because they're not going to talk. Right. You have to be the one to connect those services and, get them to work in a way that is integrated for your own health.
Yeah. In your opinion, pointing it back to the workplace, how do you feel workplace cultures might unintentionally reinforce the idea that women should just, quote unquote, push through those changes?
Yeah. In my opinion, I believe the biggest factor is around time. When we say push through, what it looks like for people in the workplace is time, is ability to focus and to do it in an effective way. Those things aren't given. And so when we're asking people to work in the same way that they have always worked or in a way that the business has always operated, it is not sustainable, it is not fair, and largely it's ineffective. And so I urge leaders in whatever level of leadership that is to address the correlation of what is necessary for a business, which is the bottom line. I get it. We've got to operate, but understand the correlation of what these things mean to your bottom line. And if you have women who are talking, especially when they come to you, and I've seen this. I am working with a woman right now. I have seen this. She has asked for support. She has expressed her needs and where she's at, and she was met with essentially nothing. She was met with, that's interesting. There was no other like, how can I support you? There was no other, here's what we can do to be flexible. Here's what we can do to rearrange things in a way that help you with your longevity in this company.
Sure.
So there's no retention there. And again, this is mind-boggling to me. It's a fairly low-hanging fruit to get flexible with time, to get flexible with remote work, be able to have a way, you know, if you're fearful that they're going to be non-productive, like just look at the numbers. Look at the data. Like, how many calls do they take? How many tasks do they get done? How many patients do they get scheduled? There are ways that we can do that. Maybe it's not even remote work. Maybe if you're in a clinical setting where you don't have that option, cool. Give them some time. If they're asking for time to be able to balance all of the plates in their life, or just take a breath, right? Just as like take a breath for themselves.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a half day. Maybe it's one day. Maybe it's that you hire another person and give each person on the team that day or half day, or have someone just on call so that when these people need a mental health day, or they need the day to, whether it's consistently, right? They just need Wednesdays off to go see their parent in the retirement community or something like that. Like, time is the hottest commodity.
Yeah.
And it has been for a long time. Awareness is right there up with it. And when we are fraying at the seams, neither one of those things are being supported. And that is the number one, easiest, lowest hanging, biggest difference maker, is that alone. Are there more things that we can do? Absolutely. There are some toolkits that are in development, but I think that's a really easy one to really address that for people who are in this phase and wanting to learn. Do we have people in positions who are open to asking that question of, you know, like, why are we seeing this drop in productivity, or why are we seeing this change in our numbers this year? It wasn't there last year. Things like that, like just having people willing to have those thoughts and questions.
For people that have worked with me or know me well, I think most will describe me as a true people leader. You know, you hear some people say it and it's bullshit. And then you know some people that live it and it's very real. And I've always been of the opinion, if you invest in your people, they run your business. And all you have to do is provide them the resources, be that partner. I know we're in church now, I'm preaching. One thing that came to mind as you were talking through this and considering some of the effects a woman may feel during perimenopause, I keep coming back to psychological safety. If you are in a workplace environment that there is psychological safety, perhaps you could go to your employer or your lead or medical director and say, you know, I don't know what's happening right now, but I am having trouble focusing. And so I understand that you're trying to drive our appointment times 15 minutes, but I am struggling. And really, you keep mentioning this and weaving it through the convo, and I want to highlight it because I fear there are leaders that this is going right over their head. You have to also consider the cost of losing your team. And so it's that balance of, yes, we're a business. Yes, we don't want to be taken advantage of. But in the same token, well, does it benefit everyone? If this is psychologically safe, you can come to me and we can troubleshoot and provide a solution that gets you through this so you don't burn out, so you don't quit, so we're not down a doctor, let's say. So in your opinion, for a leader that might be hearing this combo for the first time today, and they're like, perimenopause is a thing? Oh my God, right? It's a thing, a real thing. What is the first step they should take to make their workplace more supportive? What does that look like?
Love that. So you brought up something really important, which is that idea of psychological safety. And I think that's important because it's still not a concept that most leaders are familiar with or employees are familiar with. But I myself have experienced poor like have been in workplaces where that's not there.
Yeah.
And I was able to put language around that for myself, but it took months of being in these places before I was able to go, this is what's happening. This is what I'm experiencing, which is a lack of psychological safety. And so for people who don't know what that looks like or feels like, it's not feeling comfortable having those conversations, or having a conversation and then nothing happened. Right? Nothing changed. Nothing's getting better. In fact, things might be getting worse. And, the other part is, when you say like, what can we do? It's getting familiar with these topics. It's being willing to have a conversation with your employees. It's being willing to put something together for them. I think if you want to begin with yourself, you would just get educated, just learn about it, just get a sense of awareness on what it is, how it looks in your organization, and what you can do to support people. Maybe it's that, just like we have mental health and well-being champions or advocates in the spaces that we're in, you at a point, and it could be a separate person, right? Some clinics might have a well-being champion, others might not. Just at a point, an advocate, right? I'm sure there's people in the clinic who, just like with well-being, they're interested in the topic and they're willing to help other people. When we look at applications and stuff, most people get into these programs not always for themselves. Helping themselves is this beautiful breakthrough that happens, but when they come to us, they're like, how do I help the person in the foxhole next to me? And so I think that's what we do have going for us in vet med. And I've heard this from other people outside of the industry. Dr. Barry Feldman is a behavioral health expert who we work with, and he's worked with first responders and veterans and educational institutions. And he recognized that about people in vet med, is that we are willing to help the person next to us. And we want to bring these things into our space. And so I think that's something which can be easily done, just like through a little focus. Like if you see something come across your feed, instead of just scrolling past it, click on it. Click on that, read that article, find out who are some other leaders in the space of these discussions. And they're growing, right? We have celebrity leaders who are becoming advocates for this type of work. The information is at our fingertips if we're willing to grab it.
Yeah.
Which is different than, like you said, 10 years ago when the information wasn't there. Like, it's at our fingertips and it's really easy to access.
Yeah.
For somebody that might be feeling crazy or maybe experiencing perimenopausal symptoms and they're not even aware, what is a takeaway you want them to hear from you today? What's one piece of advice we could give them?
That you can redesign things. That's the takeaway. If you're in a space where you feel like you are not thriving, where you feel like you're crazy, you're struggling with relationships or your inner self relationship, whatever the thing is that you're experiencing. Maybe it is burnout. Maybe it's overworked. Maybe it's I can't pay my bills. Maybe it's that I want more time with my kid. Maybe it's that I want more time with myself. Maybe it's that you have to take care of your elderly parents and you don't know how. Whatever the thing is, the big, heavy things in your life that all compounded. The one thing is that it can be redesigned. And I encourage you to redesign things around your energy. And if your energy is depleted, start journaling, like start writing down not just the negative things, but when you have a day that goes beautifully, write down that recipe. What is it about that day that you felt alive, that you felt aligned, that you felt connected with those that you care for, connected with yourself? Start writing those things down, redesign things. One of the things, I'm doing it myself right now, and it always looks the same for me. And I have figured out things that I would not have thought was possible, but it looks the same in the sense of I will carry around like piles and piles of like legal pads and like calendars and journals and coaching questions, and it's to say that I am trying to get all of the mental real estate that I have out of my head onto paper, figure out a system and rework that system time and time again. And every time I have a question or if I can solve that, it's like I'm putting it down. And I promise you, at some point, you will get these little levers that you'll pull and it'll work and it'll move you closer and closer to this thing that you're trying to solve for, that bigger issue that you're trying to solve for. And I want you to believe that it's like it is possible to do these hard things. And you might have to get creative and you might have to get resourceful and you might have to do things that are uncomfortable or that are new or that are scary, but you kind of start to answer the question of like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Is it worth it to me to do this thing that is arguably scary, and at some point it oftentimes, and maybe you're not there yet, but it can be redesigned. It definitely can be redesigned, and you can get to a place where things feel lighter, where you feel like yourself again.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. I'm hearing you say this is not the time to be a passive participant in what's happening to you, but rather really dig in, become proactive, advocate, and to some degree have the courage of redesigning what that life, that system, what have you, looks like so that you can become happy again and thrive and productive and obviously hopefully leading farther and farther away from those things like burnout and compassion fatigue. Renee, I know we're up on time. I want to thank you so much. This was such a fun topic for me. It was great. I appreciate all of the work you've done thus far and hope that this helps to continue the conversation that it sounds like is needed today.
Thank you so much for having me. I am honored to be here with you. It was fantastic catching up with you and reconnecting. I do hope this sparks, a bigger conversation, but certainly even those individuals who feel a little bit more empowered after listening to this episode.
Yeah, thank you.